So I just wanted to give a quick intro about the podcast. Time management is a big problem of mine, and Georgia and I ran out of time, and so she graciously agreed to do a part two. We got to the cancel culture question, um, we got about halfway through, and so I just want to say that it is cut short, and hopefully she does a part two. And so there is an abrupt ending because of that. She had a meeting she had to go to because we recorded it quite early on in the day, and so I just want to add that as a clarification. So hopefully everything's fine, and happy listening. All right, switch over. So hello everyone, welcome to the third appearance of Georgia on the podcast. The what I'm renaming to the Let's Talk Now podcast, which is inspired by Khabib and Georgia. I know this is probably not your thing, but there's like a really funny moment during a fight where the guy he stares at the other guy and goes, "Let's talk now." So it's pretty barbaric, to be honest. And yeah, I don't agree with the guy's political beliefs, but I tell you what, man, the guy's terrifying, and it kind of fits in with the theme of this podcast, which is talking about stuff. And so,
That's good.
have you got the questions in front of you?
Yes.
So do you want to start explaining some of these economic terms then? So we've got like
Yes.
GDP, GDP per capita, things like unemployment, central banks, stock markets. So the three main sectors of the economy. So you've got agriculture, manufacturing, services. So do you want to just quickly just introduce one and then just go off about it?
Yeah, sure. So we'll start with GDP. GDP stands for gross domestic products. Gross domestic product indicates the total amount of money represented in goods and services that a country produces throughout the year without any export goods that come in or imports. So it's just what the country produces throughout the year. Um, and it shows the amount of money that the country has. So in a way, it's the wealth of the country for that certain year. GDP per capita shows how much of that total amount of money is per each population. So let's say UK GDP. So UK in a year produces goods and services worth about 1.3 trillion, and the UK has about 70 million people. So to find GDP per capita, you divide the total amount of GDP per total amount of population. So 103 billion trillion. No, it's 1.3
Yeah,
trillion to
that'd be crazy numbers,
70
wouldn't it?
million
103
to
trillion.
70 million.
Jesus.
No,
Okay.
the total GDP of the world is 78 trillion. So no, 1.3
Yeah,
trillion
that'd be pretty
to
crazy. It's
70.
just the UK's got more high GDP than the whole world combined. That'd be insane. All right. That was good. So you got unemployment, which is pretty simple.
Yeah, unemployment is just showing how many people, percentage of people do not have work.
And
However, we need
oh,
to make sure when we say that um, unemployment is percentage of people from labor force that do not have job but are looking for a job in the period of 2 to 4 weeks.
and
So
oh
yeah,
yeah,
if you don't look for job in more than this period, then actively looking that you're not part of labor force.
and
So
obviously there are problems with the way unemployment is measured. So I know America has a few different metrics, and obviously in the UK I think it's similar. Where if you're not actively looking for a job but you're not working, then you're not technically classed as being unemployed. And
yes,
in
yes,
America they have weird metrics. They're like they don't count they count students as being unemployed as well, and it's a bit of a bizarre system they have there. So that's why you have like I think it's called the U6 unemployment, and then you have the normal unemployment numbers. And obviously in the UK, if you constantly kick people out of the universal credit, then technically that means they're not unemployed, and that makes the figures look better. Um, about
yeah.
accurate there. Okay, so you want to talk about central banks?
So central bank is the main governmental body that is responsible for interest rates, for exchange rates. It does not deal with taxes or with amount of money that we put on imports, but it deals with the monetary policies. So about money supply, how much money are printed, how much money is in the economy, it looks at the, as I said, interest rate, exchange rate, and as an example, of course, England, Fed in America, um and in Europe is the European Central Bank.
Are
They're
they
responsible.
are they important? Like, do central banks play a key
Yes,
role in the economy? So what kind of stuff? I know they control interest rates, but that's about as far as my knowledge goes. I know they have to try to deal with inflation, and then you've got things like quantitative easing. That's another thing that central banks typically deal with. Do you want to explain kind of their role then?
yes. So another thing, as you said, quantitative easing is when it's mostly done by the government as well. So when there is a debt, or on the other side, when the country has too much money, they either can sell or take bonds from the private sector or country itself. So if they are selling bonds, then they're looking for investment within their budget. However, if they are buying, then the government has more money and is ready to invest.
I tell you what, people think politics is confusing. Economics is just way worse. Like, I don't care what anyone says. Like, economics is way more confusing. Um, and so yeah, obviously, things like interest rates aren't controlled by central government. Is there any specific reason why you wouldn't just give that to the exchequer? Why you would have to create a separate branch for that?
To be honest, to control money, it's a bit more difficult because
Specialized.
it's fluctuating.
It's a bit more specialized dealing with things like that. And how much power do central banks have? So if we talk about the Bank of England, how much power do they have over there?
You see, because they are a separate body uh, from exchequer, for example,
Yeah,
they are able to borrow money to government, and they can lend money to government as well.
and that happened recently, right? You said the
Yeah,
uh, the the UK government took out. Was it how much was the overdraft?
the overdraft 55 billion. I think the debt overall was
Was
for
that to
May.
the central bank?
That's total debt of the government with some
What
debt
what?
from Bank of England. I don't really know the
Okay.
percentage exactly.
What if we say to the Bank of England, we're not paying you back? Sorry, man. We ain't got the money. What happens then?
The country will kind of
What?
default on its own debt,
Yeah.
and as a result, we will need help from IMF, World Bank.
Oh no,
That
that's not good.
can lead to higher tax for us,
And our credit rating would
taxpayers.
go down as well, wouldn't it? The international credit rating, like the AAA thing, right?
Yes. So,
So
yes, I said quantitative easing is something that is it's what they do. So buying securities or these bonds to add new money to the economy.
so quantitative easing is just putting more money into the economy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and so obviously you've got the problem with that is it can cause inflation. That's why governments typically don't do it,
Mm-hmm.
or central banks in this case
That's right.
typically don't do it because obviously the inflation problem is real, and obviously um, maybe next time I think it would be worth talking about modern monetary theory because everyone's talking about it, but it takes time to actually understand it. Like I've watched I think I must have watched like 3 hours of content of it, and I'm still confused. And so asking you to explain that in like the space of like 10 minutes would just be really unfair. And so is that something you want to do next time? Modern monetary theory.
Yeah, it can be.
Okay, okay, that's fine. So we've got that. So the stock market. So do you want to just talk about the stock market quickly?
Stock market is about the shares. You know, we have big companies, Apple,
Google.
Amazon,
Yeah.
John Lewis, that have shares. So stock market is controlling all the prices, or not all the prices, but is conducting the exchange between buying and selling stocks.
So who?
They are doing, they are responsible to look at how the stock price overall, like the average stock market of stock price of the share, the price of a share is fluctuating throughout the time.
Who
Um,
sets the prices of a share of shares? Is it the company itself, or is it how does that work?
yeah, usually companies, they are the ones to set the price. However, again, it depends. With this time of coronavirus, when people don't really spend much money, a lot of shares in price go down.
Because it's about
So
confidence, right? It's about like if you have
it's
confidence
about
in a company, yeah.
confidence.
So yeah, that's why the stock market like is very hard to understand because it's not it like confidence isn't a thing like it's not logic based. You know, like say for example, Tesla recently, their stock prices were going up, and Elon Musk said the stock price was way too high, and it just tanked. And so it's based around confidence of the company, right? Where you think it's going to go,
Yes,
and so
of
that's
the company, and also look at what competitors do
yeah,
and
and
what your sharers are expecting.
obviously the long term implications are like something like Zoom is going to be around for a long time as long as another competitor doesn't pop up, and obviously it's really necessary now and it will be necessary for a few more years, at least. Obviously now more people know they can work from home, and so more people may actually take that option. Okay, so I think that covers the stock market. It's just not the FTSE 100 is the top 100 companies in the UK, right?
Yeah,
And obviously you got like different like you've got like the Nasdaq and all the other ones as
there's so
well.
many. There are two main ones in America. There are a few in Europe. There are a
Yeah,
few in
it's
UK.
the Dow
So
Jones
it's
and the Nasdaq, right, in America.
yeah as well.
Okay, and so yeah, the stock market is just it's very it doesn't really give you a massive indication of how good the economy is doing or how good ordinary people are doing. Um, Purely because most ordinary people, I think, aside from um, pensions,
How to
are
say,
most people don't have money in the stock market, right?
it's important to that stock market is doing well because let's say the price of share goes down, it means that the overall value of a company is going down. If the overall value is going down, then the company would not be able to sustain itself and would not be able to exist, pay pay for production, pay for their workers. So stock market is important. We
And
created this cycle.
yeah, and so obviously there are problems with like companies paying their shareholders dividends, and obviously funding work money that could go to workers and other places, to other people, or reinvesting it within the company. They pay out dividends to people who uh, effectively haven't really worked for the company. I think that's a separate thing, like an ethical thing, I guess. And that's why some people do like work out in co-ops and things like that, so you don't have that sort of issue. So yeah,
Mhm.
I think stock market is not. I think that'll do it. So you want to talk about the three main sectors of the economy? So you've got agriculture, manufacturing, and services.
Yeah, so agriculture, yeah, that's the main three things that can be linked to
Mm.
GDP. What the country is producing throughout the year: agriculture, manufacturing, and services, goods and services.
All right, and
We know
so
that
oh
agricultural countries, it's called also as a primary industry, so it's not very, let's say, it's a lot of not protectionism, but how do you call it? Patent?
patent,
Not
patent.
patent. Like countries that produce just they can produce.
It's like subsistence farming. Is that the
No,
thing?
no, that's
No?
a different one. Um,
Uh,
when they have just they have the rights to do that.
like exclusivity, something like that.
No, no, no. I think it's like patent. Yeah, like patent. So just some countries are able to produce some of the goods that grow just in their country, and they
Oh, is it
can export
like
them.
champagne? It's like a intellectual. It's not. Is it? I don't think it's called intellectual property.
Intellectual property. Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
champagne you can only grow that in. You can only make that in France, right? And obviously,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I think Cornish pasty. I think it's something like can only be made in a certain place or something like that. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. And so yeah, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So obviously, agriculture is the lowest valued out of the three, even though obviously it's the one I guess humans need the most to live, obviously. And obviously, agriculture is valued the least, correct? And
At the moment, yeah.
at the same time, like I know, even if the UK brought back fishing rights, it wouldn't be worth a lot to the bigger economy purely because in terms of like fish, it's not worth a lot the industry. Um,
You see, it's it's good for big countries to produce
mm,
agriculture because they get subsistences or they get like benefits, help from the government. and
Yeah.
they are able to produce more at a cheaper price and export.
And obviously they have better technology, and that really helps massively as well. And you in
Yeah,
theory have more expertise. Obviously, in your native country you would do, but when you go to foreign countries, that's where you have issues. And that's something we've seen historically, right? With some countries going back to how they used to farm purely because it's how it works. Like I think Native American people, they sometimes burnt the land and then planted crops afterwards because that was the best way to grow things. But when the settlers went over, they were like, "What the hell are you savages doing?" And so agriculture, like, it's very complex. Like it's
it's complex,
yeah,
but
it's beyond
I
just
was
putting seeds in the
linking
ground.
I was linking it to nowadays. For example, when there is a trade, or let's say a country that is again in debt or something like that, and the IMF, World Bank come to help, they are saying that that country cannot give like help,
Yeah,
financial help to their farms, to their farmers.
yeah.
That
I know.
country most likely is an agricultural country, the main export.
I know.
So without
Oh,
any help from the government, the agricultural part industry or agricultural part will decrease, and in this way, either the exports will be higher in price or they will be just lower. The people will not be able to produce massively.
we know that that's a big problem with the US and China currently. As one of the issues is that what's it called when they pay you? It's like state aid, but there's like a word for it. Subsidize, when they subsidize farming, and obviously, I think one lady, she was a professor. At, I think university, one of the London university, one of the big ones, and she said
Yeah,
something on the lines of, this was like a interview from last year where she said the US had violated multiple WTO sort of rules with subsidizing things like farming, because the US farms are heavily subsidized.
hmm
And so she was saying that how can the US complain about China subsidizing companies when the US also subsidizes companies? It don't make sense. And subsidizes farms. I think specifically that was the issue. And so agriculture, like in terms of like farming, it's very expensive, and it does require help from the state by the looks of things. So obviously manufacturing is just the production of goods, right? So
yes,
physical goods like phones, cars, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Cool. And services are like things like banking. Um,
Yeah, something that you can't touch, but you can offer to people in a way.
is that a saying?
So
Is that a saying?
yes, you can say that. Like for example, you go hairdressing. That's a
Yeah.
service. You
Okay.
go buying a house. Like okay, you have a house, but
You're buying the
taking
from someone. Yeah.
yeah,
The agent. Yeah. So I guess construction, is that fall more under manufacturing then, or is that
yeah,
separate?
that's more likely manufacturing. Another
Yeah.
one is insurance. You don't
Yeah.
really see your insurance, in physical way.
Yeah. You goddamn hope it's there when you need it though.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing. The
Okay.
debt, loans.
Okay, so and services are worth the most out of the three, which is surprising, seeing as it's not a physical thing. Um, it is quite funny, I guess, in some ways. And the UK is mainly a service based economy. That's where we make most of the money from. The city of London. So you've got the top. You've got the stock market, which makes a lot of money
Which is
for,
a service.
which is a service. Yeah, you've got that. You've got banking. You've got accountants. You've got lawyers. All those people, and the UK is a heavily service based economy, and so that will cause problems later on when we talk about Brexit potentially. But yeah, so they're like the three main sectors, because this is more of like an economics 101 thing, I guess. So the US being the world's based economy, what does base currency? What does that mean?
US being world's base economy or currency, it means
Currency, yeah.
that currency, yeah, it means that all the transactions, like US dollar, is the international currency of the world in terms of exports, measuring GDP, all these things like that. Wait, so it US US became a currency of the world, I think, in like 1944, during nearly the end of the Second World War. That was because it was after the Bretton Woods Agreement. That was because at that time US had the most amount of gold reserves in the world, and by that time, more gold you have, it means more money you have.
And
So
obviously,
other countries of the world that didn't have that much gold started to make reserves of dollars. Just in case if any other war comes or if just keeping peace of the country. Let's keep reserves.
and obviously, if anything happens to your native currency, say the pound, as long as you have dollars, there's still things you can do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so the US has always been seen as a safe bet, despite the fact that the US has caused multiple global recessions. But that might be more of a nature of just how big the US economy is and how important it is to the globe, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
we're now kind of seeing that with China when the Chinese economy slows down. Everyone's like, oh no, things are not looking good. And so maybe China's usurping. I don't think it will take over as the world's base currency, but I don't have obviously a lot of expertise in that one. That's more your field, but it's just because the US is seen as a safe bet, right? That's one of the main reasons that the US is the world's base currency, and
Yeah,
it's
China
respected.
not yet, but it can be expected in near future.
I think the euro was also an option at some point as well. But yeah, I think like obviously pre Trump, the US was a lot more respected globally. But then again, you had George W. Bush as well, so I don't know how much that holds. But yeah, the US being the base currency is just like everything gets traded in dollars, so oil and things like that. And I think it makes life easier generally having a base currency as well. Do you think that's the case?
Uh, Sometimes it makes it easier, but sometimes no, as you said. It gives that security that you can, whatever happens, that this currency will never die. It will
Yeah.
always stabilize automatically. However, it being a world currency, the main country that uses it is US. So if something happens in US, then it's going to be a domino effect on all the other countries of the world.
And boy, are things happening in the US. Mass unemployment. The pandemic. Did you see Trump is shutting down testing centers?
Well, no,
He
I
said like
haven't got so far.
if you don't test anyone, there's no coronavirus. I'm like, and if I don't weigh myself, I haven't put on weight. The weight's not there. You know, it doesn't make sense. I tell you. And
No, to
so
be honest, it's a sensitive topic talking about
yeah, weight
coronavirus.
issues are. Oh, fair enough. I thought you were going to go for weight issues there, but yeah, yeah. It just that's why there's a question about it specifically there. So what happens if you default on your debt as a country? So what if the US says we're not going to pay back, China and whoever else we owe money to, or I guess the US is a bit more of a different example because they are the world's reserve currency. So if we say the UK, we just say we're not going to pay back a debt. What happens? Because we know Argentina had a similar problem, right? I think I'm not sure when they
14.
had. Was it 2014?
Yeah,
Or
kind of near that time.
they couldn't pay back their debts, and so what happens?
In this case, the best thing you can do is either change the currency or again go to contractory um, policies, financial fiscal policies, increasing the tax for the people, cutting government spending. So in this way, the country doesn't spend much and
So
people pay more.
austerity, essentially,
Hmm?
austerity.
Yeah, austerity. Or an example that was in 2008 in Zimbabwe, where the inflation just crazy run up. They changed the currency. It took,
It's like sorry in Germany where they changed the mark right during the I think it was the 20s when they had hyperinflation. They just changed the currency and that seemed to help a bit. Yeah.
the change is a bit, but you need to come up with new monetary and fiscal policies automatically and definitely in order to make sure that this currency is going to keep well. And there is readjustment time. So even if you change the currency, it does take time for population to get confident in it.
Yeah.
It's building up.
Okay. So is it important for countries to have their own currency?
That's a very good one. The European Union, Greece, um, drachma.
because it does mean you can print more money. So obviously, modern monetary theory is, I think, if you have your own currency, there are a lot more things you can do with it. And I think next time we'll have to talk about that one. I feel like that one's important, the theory. But obviously with Greece, like I don't think they can print more money because
No,
they're not the
they're
currency holder.
no, they're part of European Union, and the currency that they are using is euro. So it means European Central Bank is responsible for it.
And so obviously,
And again, they can't print more because usually when you print more money, money supply increases. It means that the value of euro will decrease.
okay, inflation.
It's no inflation. It's more like, let's say, if UK prints more money, then the value of pound to dollar will decrease because there are more money in the economy. So it's it values less.
Do you know? I saw a really interesting thing about the Fed, and that's something we'll talk about later. That's towards the end. But they said right, they just move decimal points on a computer, and that's how they do like financial stuff. And I was thinking like, is that real? Like, is that all they do?
Um, I don't really think so. I don't see it working that way. You see, one currency is good when there is balance and there is stability. And also in case of Europe, we need to think about different countries. So you can't compare economy of France or Germany to that of Greece or Cyprus because let's say first is about purchasing power. Purchasing power tells you about it's the same as GDP, but however, $1 or €1 in France can buy you one bread. However, in Greece, it can buy you three breads.
Probably buy you the whole shop. To be fair, the way the Greek economy went at one point, isn't it? It was
Yeah, so
it's really
that's
bad.
that's what I mean.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can't.
I get that.
Yeah.
Um, so that okay,
So
so that okay. So where's the Keynesian economics? You want to do like a basics of that?
yeah, it's basically Keynes came with a theory. I think after First World Depression in 30s, where he was a bit against, private sector to take decisions about investments, spendings, and he came to say that government should get involved in some fiscal monetary policies
Socialism.
in order to reconstruct the economy. No, it's not socialism.
I
It's more
know,
like
I
a
know.
social
It's what
democrat.
right wingers saying is that socialism. Government's meant to stay out of the way of the private sector, man. The private sector will do everything. It's just sorry. It's one of them things where like people do. Okay, there are lots of people who think that like the private sector will solve all the world's problems, and so yeah, his kind of philosophy is based around borrowing in the bad times and then investing in the economy, right?
Yeah.
And by investing in the economy, then you get people back into work, which helps stimulate the economy. Because you need people to spend money. If people don't have money, then it stifles everything. And so when the good times come in, you pay back those debts, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so
Yeah.
infrastructure projects is a big one, I think, for them. Obviously, FDR was a believer in Keynesian economics. With his New Deal, when he invested in building dams, I think the FDR dam is still a thing somehow, like nearly a century on, which is quite crazy. They don't build them like they used to, and so I think that's kind of the basics of Keynesian economics. Is there a problem with inflation with Keynesian economics if you pump too much money into the economy? Would that be a factor? Would inflation come into it?
Put money again. It depends on what basis are you doing it. If it's quantitative easing or if it's done from the government by increasing spending and cutting tax, then it won't. But if it's printing money, then most likely yes.
Because the way taxes kind of work is you take money out of the economy in a way as well, not just for government spending, but also it works as a way of just you sort of taking a bit of money out to stop inflation, right? That's one of the things that taxes can do. I think interest rates are similar in that respect, right?
Yeah, and actually it can lead to higher um, debt or higher inflation because if you think, well, people have more money, so the demand for some of the goods will increase. If the demand increases but supply no, it means that the price of that good will increase. So that's what we call inflation when the price goes up.
All right. So, do you want to start? We'll reel this off quick because I don't know how much time we're gonna have for the bigger questions. So, the debt obviously is the debt the country is in. So, how much? I think it's to do with bonds and also borrowing, right?
Yeah, so how much money the country owes to the central bank, to external banks,
And
to
bonds
international countries, organizations as well.
and bonds as well, right?
Yeah,
And so the US, China has bought a load of US Treasury bonds. I think they own like, I think it's like it's not 5% or something like that of US Treasury bonds. Is it higher? Do you think it's higher?
not really sure about this, to be honest.
I like that. I least you're honest. Like some people, they're just like, yeah, yeah, sure. You know, I probably would say that. Yeah, I think the China has a significant amount, or 5% is not a significant amount, but they do have a lot of U.S. Treasury bonds, and that's why the U.S. owes the money. I believe that's how it works, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And so the debt is the total amount, and the deficit is like the gap between spending and
Making money.
making. Yeah, so like through the money you get through taxes and things like that, and then obviously it goes against your expenditure.
Yeah,
That's the
in a way,
deficit.
you can say deficit is tax minus spending of
Yeah,
the government.
I like that. And then obviously surplus is when you're making more money than you're spending, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so inflation. So we talked about that a minute ago, but do you want to just explain inflation?
Inflation is basically the price level, overall price level of a country or an economy, um, showing how much the price has increased from the previous year. So how you do it, percentage wise, you look at the price of this year minus the price of the last year. You divide that by the price of first year times 100.
That's good. That's maths for anyone who's not aware, and that is not what I do. So that's why I bring on smart people like Georgia to explain the stuff. And so I'm terrible at maths.
Formula.
My younger brother, I reckon he'd be decent at economics. Like he's already got the maths in the bag, but he didn't take that route. Unfortunately, I think it would have been good for him in some ways. But inflation, obviously, you have rapid inflation and you have deflation. So inflation is when it's not just too much money. It's when the currency loses value, right?
Currency loses money or prices go down because there is no demand, and it shows a bit of
And
a
so
crisis coming up.
and there's obviously deflation, which happened under Churchill when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, when he moved back to the gold standard. So deflation is when the value of the currency goes down.
Yeah.
And I think deflation, there's one that's good for imports and there's one that's good for exports. I think when the currency goes down, that's better for exports, right? And when the currency goes
Yeah.
up, it's better for imports.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Because if for exports you export cheaper and more, so you can export more. People can buy more.
Because it's
But
cheaper to buy.
importing,
Yeah.
yeah, importing your currency is higher, so people, yeah,
Yeah, so like I guess it's like if the currency is high when you go to America, it's great because you have more money. But when
yeah,
Americans
yeah.
come here, it's like less.
Yes, you
Um,
can exchange other currencies more
yeah, and like
and
euro, it was
more.
great. You know, pre Brexit when the pound was so much higher than the euro, and obviously it went lower. I don't know what the rates are like now, but I don't think they're as good as they were pre Brexit. So I guess that will deal with that one. So I guess that leads us on to why can't you print your way out of debt is mainly because there's an inflation issue as well, and obviously if your currency gets devalued, then the debt kind of increases. Is that
Yes,
right? And so
yes,
that's why the
yes,
reason you can't print your way out of debt is because of that. Because obviously, if you print the money, then it loses value, and that the debt goes up, and then you have another problem with inflation and possibly hyperinflation if we're talking into the billions and the trillions, right?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
there's a WTO tariff, so that's like when you do trade with another country without a trade deal, it's the tariffs put on like goods going
Yeah,
to that country. Yeah, so if I was trading with you, and there's a 10% tariff, then my goods will be 10% more expensive in that country. It'd be like a tax on
yeah,
products
yeah.
going in. Yeah, so
Or
that's
it's a
pretty simple.
quota as well, quota telling how much a country can import in your country or how
Okay.
much you can export in a certain country.
And so there's protectionism versus free trade. I probably shouldn't have thrown this one in because time constraints. But protectionism is just like making stuff within your own country and protecting your own producers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
obviously
you
free.
produce in your country and you consume in your country. You don't really welcome investors from outside.
And so it's like if you manufactured cars within this country rather than importing cars from abroad, for example. And obviously, doing free trade means like it's easier for you to trade with other countries, but also it means that it's easier for your country to import stuff, which can impact native productivity. Right, that's why Trump's always going mad about China, because China can manufacture things cheaper, and therefore it's cheaper to buy those things from China rather than
Yeah.
manufacturers in the US. And so that's kind
And
of a double edged sword.
that is what leads to the next word you were telling me about outsourcing.
Yeah, oh, yeah, that's a great segue. I was just reading these off, but yeah, that was yeah, that's professional of you, George. I respect that. Uh,
Trying.
you're a natural. You're a natural on the media circuit. It took me a while to find my voice on YouTube and stuff. So, what are your thoughts on outsourcing? And so, obviously, you're a big pusher of taking the jobs from English people, right, Georgia, from Moldova.
Yes, definitely. You see, I'm a migrant, so I'm here to steal the jobs.
If someone's gonna clip that up, it's gonna be great. It's like,
No,
so Georgia, I see you have come to steal people's jobs. Like, correct? It's like that's why I'm here.
yes,
Georgia steals jobs, bam. And so, yeah, do you want to just explain outsourcing, sort of the pros and cons of it?
no, no. It's of course a joke, but yeah, outsourcing is when, for example, um, as you said, producing in China and selling it to the Western world, or let's say companies have their headquarters in, let's say, a British company. Um,
So Dyson would have been an example until they moved their headquarters to Singapore fully. So they had a lot of the manufacturing from Malaysia and Singapore because it was cheaper, and they bring the products in
yeah.
here.
So
So
let's
yeah,
say Mercedes. They have their headquarters in Germany, right? Uh, um,
probably. Well, yeah, probably. I would be surprised if they didn't.
yeah, Mercedes, Volkswagen, these cars. Their production points, production assemblies are in other countries where labor is cheaper.
I
Um,
think is it
they have a
Slovakia
few,
or one of those countries, the top car manufacturer in the EU. I can't remember which one it was, Slovakia or Slovenia. Uh,
yeah, Slovakia does good Skoda, um, but they produce parts in China, in India, in some of the Latin American countries as well because labor is cheaper. However, and it's cheaper for them to pay their people to produce, um, so they can sell more cars
mm.
to the Western world,
And it's
maybe
not
at a bit higher price.
it's not just
In a
labour.
way,
Oh, sorry.
uh,
No, no, sorry, carry on. In a way,
no, no, in a way, you can look at this from two sides. It's good because they offer jobs to that countries that are poor countries, so they like boosting the economy. However, what kind of jobs are they creating? They're creating, as we call them in UK, non-skilled jobs, and the conditions are sometimes not very good,
some
and the
of them
pay
some of them are skilled
also.
jobs, like car manufacturing. But yeah, the that kind of leads us on to talking about things like the race to the bottom with regards to workers' rights. So and obviously lower pay as well. And is it giving people someone a job or is it exploiting them? So in Bangladesh, we've seen that like people work in sweatshops and like yes, you've given them money. Which is giving them, more money than they had before, but at the same time, you are exploiting them with the working conditions that you've given them, and so
Yeah,
that's a key problem. And obviously, with outsourcing, you're taking away jobs from decent paid people in say the UK or the US. If you talk specifically about the US with Detroit, Detroit was a massive manufacturer of cars. They called it the Motor
yes,
City, and so once those jobs went, Detroit just struggled massively with lots of things. Where like when you take money out of the local economy, that impacts everything: schools, hospitals, and all those sorts of things. And so outsourcing can be a good thing in some ways, but at the same time, like, it does have massive negative connotations as well. So we've talked about surplus. So economic cycle, boom and bust. So do you want to just talk about that? So
yeah. Economy has four phases. So firstly, it's about bust, or let's say it's about recession, which we're in now. I can say, I think.
are we in? Are we?
Um,
It's true, isn't it? We are in a recession. Yeah.
After that is so that's the top and bottom. After that we have recovery when things are starting to get better, jobs are increasing, we have boom. When the economy is in top, investment is good, people can afford many things. And after that is slum when the economy again starts to slow down.
And obviously you have
This is the econ.
stagnation
Huh?
as well, where the economy just
Yeah.
stays like pretty the same. It doesn't really go up or down. That's where the UK's been for the last few years. I think pre COVID, where the economy we weren't in a boom or a negative spiral. We're just pretty stable, right?
Yeah, which is good as well.
It's good in some ways, but at the same time, like it's very hard to take a victory lap over you like not really improving the country, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's good compared with the rest
But
of the world.
yeah, and obviously the oh wait, it's called the Great Recession for a reason. It's not as bad as the '30s depression, but it's still it's still very bad, right?
Yes, yes.
It did that one did cut deep, and so this is another important question. So the importance of having middle class. So this is something that Bernie Sanders talks about, where like the middle class is disappearing. I would do a Bernie impression, but I don't want to disrespect the man like that. Not this early, anyways. And so is it important to have a middle class? And obviously a lot. Neither of us are like massive lefties here, and so if Georgia, I swear, if you come out with some sort of Marxist critique, yeah, you will bamboozle me here. Like, I would not
Yeah.
expect this from you. Is it important to have a middle class?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, why is that?
That's that's what keeps the economy going if you think in economic terms, but also it gives a good um, it gives how do you call it, a good ranking, let's say, of development for your country if people have what to eat, what to wear, if they can afford things. So now with that's why I can say I'm a total leftist or total right wing. um, you can't
So
have
you're hated by everyone.
everyone the same as in socialism
Yeah.
because some people actually do work harder, some people don't work that hard. However, with full capitalism on, people that have opportunities and people that, let's say, are from a better background are more likely to get more money. People that were born in a vulnerable, let's say, family, they're less likely to get out,
It's
the
very much
poverty.
the rules of the jungle. It's very much like at that point the strongest do win. So
Yes,
like, yeah, in the jungle, it's very rare that like a mouse or something is going to beat a lion,
yeah.
and it's like that where
Social mobility.
yeah, social
Social
mobility is so
mobility.
important. That's why having a middle class can be a good thing, something to be aspire to be, if you're from a poorer background. But at the same time, like, I don't think it's the end all and be all. Like, it's important, but at the same time, like, I think having the ability to move up social class, like being able to own
That's
property
important.
and things like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just being able
because
like,
otherwise we have increase in inequality, income inequality.
mm,
So that's why I go and I would agree here with Keynes. Some of the parts of the economy have to belong to the government, so like they make sure that everyone has access to
uh,
education, health, electricity, water. That's good. But on the other side, people need to have the opportunity to develop themselves as well, business-wise, small enterprises, import, export, travel as well. So a good combination. So there
okay.
is opportunity for everyone.
Okay, and yeah, I've forgotten. It's obviously being able to buy property and things like that is very important for lower for working class people because that's how you pass on wealth as well. There was a government report that came out recently. It's what I need to do. I need to do a video on that where they talked about social mobility being I think lower or than it was before, and obviously if it's very hard to come out of being poor when there's you have to live in the rented sector and all your money's going on your rent essentially. And I did see a lot of people saying landlords don't, they're not entitled to a third of your income, which I actually agree with a lot. It's not right that we live in a system where a landlord can take a third or a quarter or however much of your income, um, just because they own property and their like their money makes money. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay, so do you the term petit bourgeois is something that Marx I think threw around.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You want
Referring to people not to that are not, how to say, not
rich? Yeah, they're not.
not too rich, but they have some means of survival. Either they are owners of a small business,
Hmm.
owners of a small land, or they work in a pretty good company. Of course, not having the best position, but yeah,
So
something like
so
that.
it's like upper working class and lower middle class, right? I think that'd probably be the definition of it, or like an easy definition of it, right?
Yeah,
And so Marx didn't like the petty bourgeois because he believed they were stopping the revolution because they didn't want to give up the small thing that they had in order for the broader working class to thrive. Which I find
Yes.
interesting. Honestly, I find it really interesting that kind of philosophy where I think it's kind of true to an extent where the people would be reluctant to revolt and things like that because you would if you have something, it's very hard to give it up essentially. Um, and so yeah, shouts out Marx, and a lot of people blame him for a lot of the deaths that happened under like kind of not just his specific philosophy, but also Stalinism, Maoism, and Leninism. But at the same time, like class struggle has always been there, pre-Marx, and at the same time, like certain things they're not given; they have to be taken.
Yes.
And so I don't agree with obviously violence on a broad level, and that's something another video I have to do for the writing and stuff. But sometimes like people don't give you an option, and at the same time like there were a lot of rights that were hard fought in this country, especially with the civil war against the king. We didn't behead them like the French did, and get rid of the monarchy, but parliamentary rights I think were taken through civil war. So some things aren't given. Does the US still deserve to be called the leader of the free world? So do you think they should be?
Yes, and I'll link it back to the US being the
That's
currency of the
yeah.
world.
I was
As
not.
long as they have the currency of the world and all the countries take reserves in their currency, they are the ones to, in a way, not be the leaders or dictate what happens, but to manage the trade around the world a bit. Um, in a way, not dictate, but fluctuate the price levels, amount of goods produced, the price levels.
The thing is that that title, the leader of the free world, what it kind of means is you're the beacon of hope. You're the democracy that's there. You're going to stand up for the little man. You're the leader of the other democracies in the world. You're the one that kind of dictates the pace. But obviously we've seen with the US, the brutal crackdown of protesters, police officers shooting protesters in the face with things like rubber bullets. Spraying tear gas on peaceful protesters as well. Can a country like that still be called the leader of the free world? Essentially, the country that leads democracy, if that makes sense. I mean, the term has been in doubt for a long time, mainly because of the US's illegal wars and attacks on civilians. But do you think it still deserves that kind of title, that mantra of you're the big Donna, essentially, like you're the country that sticks to the principles, I guess. Um,
You can call it in that way still, because we know all that this is the country of opportunities and the countries of the
But is that
migrants.
but does that
We
still
know
exist
that.
though? Does that because we know social mobility in the US is I think lower than Canada, and this is a country which welcomed migrants or white migrants during the last century, but now it shuns a lot of people from poorer countries, essentially. So can that country still be called the leader of the free world when in a lot of ways it's not free? We've seen the way Kaepernick was treated for just kneeling. And I know I'm kind of loading up this question quite a lot here, but like, it's because I personally think they don't deserve that title. I think it probably belongs to Canada, but Canada don't have the kind of military power to deal with it. But at the same time, I think like is the country called if you're called the leader of the free world, should you have some powerful military where you can influence people like that, or should you be a country that's above that? You can talk to people by influencing them by using rational thought rather than saying yeah we have like over 300 nukes and we can destroy the whole world. Like you listen to us. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, yes, it's controlling through army, through brutality, in a way. With the recent policies that were implemented in US, for example, not giving green card and blocking the assurance or giving visas of work to migrants,
Yeah.
that's definitely not offering the opportunity for them to come. The
So
issue they had a few years back with Mexican migrants as well, kids in the cages,
yeah,
that's definitely not a free country.
separating kids from their parents as well, and the kind of psychological problems that causes. As well. So do you think they still deserve to be the leader of the free world? Like, do you think that's a title they deserve
No,
still?
to be honest, like the way we see it now, no. It's definitely not going that way. It's going on the other side with all the laws, protectionism, which is good. I do agree with protectionism at some level,
Mm.
but not not in that extreme. Like we are the best country, we are the best.
But
Let's
that
not forget how US was done on what basis.
yeah, and obviously the US, they do sing the national anthem every day. It's very nationalistic in that respect. And
Yeah,
so
it's the government like that.
yeah,
There are many people in US which are very welcoming and have a
Yeah.
different mentality.
Do you know?
Saying that from my own experience.
Do you know? I remember. Do you remember Sue Donnelly?
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
and Sue was saying when she taught Native American history in America, people were like, "You're lying," that didn't happen. And then Sue's like, "It did happen," and then she obviously proves that it did happen, and everyone's like, "Well, they never told us this," and so this is a country which hasn't really acknowledged its past. To that extent, it's always desperate to, forget, what it did in the past, but then at the same time, it's like, oh, we'll never forget, 9/11, we'll celebrate it, not celebrate it, but remember it every day. Pearl Harbor, remember that every day, but any atrocities we carried out, it's like, no, we don't remember that, bro. We don't remember that well.
Let's not forget that
The Trail of
Native
Tears.
Americans are not part. We're not part of Pearl Harbor. We're not part of 9/11. They were there before all the other people came. Doesn't matter what color, but they were there.
And so,
it's hard for present America to sometimes recognize what happened in the past because they were not there.
It's very difficult to acknowledge what your country's done in the past. Even the UK has a very similar problem where we laud. I think this is a topic we might be able to get to. We laud Churchill, but we never acknowledge the fact that he killed 3 million people in India through the famine. And so we hold up these guys, these generals, but at the same time, like, some of these guys don't deserve statues. So I think, like, to ask the question again, do you think the US deserves to still be called the leader of the free world? What do you say, yes or no?
It's very hard to say. I don't know which country to say at the moment. I would say maybe no. Even Singapore is more welcoming.
Oh no, I wouldn't give it to Singapore. The thing is, Germany's got a very grim past. So otherwise, I would have said it belongs to Germany. But I'll go with.
They were colonizers as well. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah, but I'm talking about in the modern history. I'm talking about post World War II. Germany hasn't really gotten involved into too many fights with anyone
because they can't still by some.
Yeah, but I suppose so. Maybe is it Switzerland is the country that hasn't been involved in a war in like 200 years?
I think yeah.
Cool, we'll give it to Switzerland then. Well done, you're the leaders of the free world. You got dodgy bankers and tax evaders, but you know what? You don't start fights with anyone, so I'll respect you. So I just want to add a clarification into the Brexit segment that Georgia and I did talking about trade. So we based it off of this article here of Barnier talking about potentially a more flexible framework, and so they might bend a bit on things like, what was it called, a level playing field. And so what we saw in this article from Barnier saying that we might have a bit of flexibility to give some leeway to give. Obviously we're not going to jeopardize the integrity of the single market, but we can give you something, if that makes sense. And so this is the article that kind of based it on, sort of talking about because this was very surprising, and this article only came out on the 24th of June. Georgia and I recorded the podcast on the 26th of June, but as things move really quickly, we can see in this article here that Angela Merkel said the UK must live with the consequences of weaker ties to the EU. So the UK will have to live with the consequences of Boris ditching Theresa May's plan to maintain close economic ties with the EU after Brexit. Angela Merkel has said, hardening her tone over the prospect of a no-deal scenario next year. After more than 3 years, in which the German Chancellor repeatedly emphasised her openness to a deal that would maintain the UK's current flow of trade with the bloc. She suggested that the door leading to such a compromise has now closed, and she talks about how something to do with regulations, things like let's see if we can find it. So he says, if Britain does not want to have rules on the environment and the labour market or social standards that compare with those of the EU, our regulations will be less close. That will mean it does not want standards to go on developing along parallel lines. And so this was a key problem with a level playing field with regards to things like regulations, and less so social standards, more so economic and labour regulations, because what the EU doesn't want is a Singapore on the Thames, a really low regulation, low standard country which is right by the EU, competing with the EU for things like financial services, and dominating similar to, I think, how Singapore have dominated Asia. And so that's the problem. So just a quick clarification, I did show this article to Georgia because this article only came out on the 26th, so this also came out yesterday. And so that's the nature of just recording stuff, I guess. And so I thought it was important to add this clarification. I did speak to Georgia about it, and she said it's probably a good idea to add this purely because it would be kind of disinformation for us to have given this article here, especially because I had the knowledge of this article prior to the podcast going out. So yeah, just letting you guys know that clearly there is not as smooth as I thought it may have been. Like there is very little leeway to be given, but then again, this is just posturing on their part. So this could be Barnier and the EU saying, we're open to giving you a deal and making concessions, but you also have to make concessions. And then once the UK doesn't make those concessions, the UK say we're not the bad guys here. But at the same time, this Angela Merkel saying we're not going to make concessions. You either have close economic ties to us, like Theresa May wanted, or you go it alone, big man. And so that's the kind of thing, the clarification I want to add. So this has gone on long enough, and so yeah, hopefully if you've made it this far, keep enjoying the video. So I'll tee this up with, we've seen some recent good news. I'll just find the article here. So Brussels is signalling a compromise on the level playing field, and so what's happening is that Brussels are saying, we might give you some leeway when it comes to level playing field, but the UK has also said that, if regulations in this country do change, then Brussels is okay to put tariffs on any UK products, which does cause more friction, but at the same time, at least we're getting somewhere, it feels like. But at the same time, like they're saying, there's not a long time for us to come up with a deal, and there's also problems with border checks where the UK has dropped plans for a full border check on goods coming from the EU, which causes another potential problem with the favourable trade thing from the WTO. So as far as I know, if you have one rule for one WTO member, the EU in this case, then you can't have trade barriers for other countries. So if you're not going to check EU goods, you can't check goods coming in from other countries, right?
Yes.
But at the same time,
as long as you don't have a trade.
Yeah, a trade deal, right?
Yeah.
And so I did.
Otherwise,
oh, go on.
No. Otherwise, you have to follow the WTO regulations. With tariffs, with quotas, depending on what type of goods you're producing and want to export, or what type of goods you want to import as well.
And also, I did. What was I going to say? I did watch a video from, I think it's a WTO seminar thing, where the lady, one of the people from the WTO, she says that as long as it's not like similar goods or like goods. So I don't know if it's going to be very hard to find if chlorinated chicken is the same as just non-chlorinated chicken. I guess the UK would say no, but then the US would say yes, and that causes more problems, right? That's kind of how you define things. And obviously, if we're not careful, we will get sued by other WTO members. And it will make it potentially more difficult for us to get trade deals if we keep messing around like this. And there was another point to be made about the UK not being able to get enough of a border force in. So the UK races to find an extra 50,000 staff for post-Brexit paperwork. And, I don't think that's been done yet. And obviously, getting the proper facilities in place to do things like checking goods is still not there, with Michael Gove saying it might take about till 2025 or 24 to actually get the computer systems up and running, which I think is a lie, because we've had massive computer issues within this country. They had it with Universal Credit, they had it with the court system, and so I would be surprised if it's closer to 2028. They get the computer systems up and running. And there was a few more things that I was going to talk about. I forgot what they were, but it's not looking too positive, is it, with Brexit? Or what do you think? Do you think it's looking better, or?
Sorry, can you say it again?
So do you think the UK is looking okay with Brexit, better with Brexit now? At least we've got some movement with regards to things like a level playing field, which obviously isn't good for the people within the UK, but it means that at least we're getting some headway. So what do you think? Because obviously before the EU was saying, if there's no level playing field, you're not going to get a deal. Sorry, that's pretty long. Sorry.
No, I know. To be honest, it's just it's really confusing because it's not yet in place, but they want to get their deal by the end of July, was it?
Something like that. They want to get a massive amount of progress done by the end of July, and July is very close, very, very close. The end of July, even for trade negotiation. And so, what do you think? Do you think how do you think things are looking?
To be honest, it's gonna be really quick, as I have read a bit, like EU wants to make a bit longer negotiations to find out, like, all the aspects of the economy,
The specifics, yeah.
agriculture, import, traveling, immigration, and blah, blah, blah. UK is like, no, we need it now. I think something in between is good, like saying
Because
that you want a deal by the end of July,
yeah,
it's very short term.
the problem is if you want the deal done quicker, you have to give more concessions, and that's something we saw with Boris when he gave the original his version of the withdrawal agreement. There were a lot of concessions in there where he gave up a lot of the UK stake in the European central bank, I think it was, where there's like billions of pounds belonging to the British taxpayer in there. We're not getting that back, and so what they did was they forced him to give up things which he should never have given up. And obviously the backstop turned into a front stop with regards to Northern Ireland, and so that's going to potentially cause more problems with border checks within the Irish Sea. So not only do we have to strengthen one side of the border for border checks, we have to do the other side of the UK as well. And there's also problems with the water there as well. I think like it's very hard to build like a land crossing between the Republic of Northern Ireland and the UK as well, like the UK mainland. And so I think my opinion is at least we're getting somewhere with regards to level playing field and things like state aid. So it's looking better in some ways, but at the same time, like I don't know what Johnson's end game is, and that's why I'm not 100% sure. What the hell's going on? Like setting up things like border checks. If we don't check these things, then we might get sued by WTO members, and that's a separate headache. Also, I don't think the UK sorted out its scheduling at the WTO, which any WTO member can veto. So we've gone from being vetoed by potentially 27 countries to I think it's well over like 100 countries in the WTO or something like that. So that causes more problems. And these guys are sharks. Like if you thought EU countries were vicious, these guys are way worse. There are some real sharks in the WTO. And so I'm not sure where we go from here because there's not a lot of planning going on in the UK. What do you think?
Same here. That's a bit unclear what will happen due to coronavirus as well. We never know how
Yeah.
it will turn. So I don't know, like this decision to do it all quickly, I don't know what effect it will have in long term.
And
Because you
obviously,
never know the effect of this other one that came surprisingly.
or what the pandemic or.
Yeah.
So do you think things are looking better, or do you think things are looking a bit worse? Because at least we've got some movement with regard to a deal.
No,
Which
it looks good. At least, some movement is there. So we know that they are doing something, which is definitely good.
Okay, so that I think that will deal with that question. At least we're getting somewhere, but it's not looking massively positive because they want to do this deal really quickly. So I guess we'll go to our next question, which is: are you surprised to see international protests at the murder of George Floyd?
Okay, let's go there. To be honest, international protests, not really, surprised.
You're not really
Actually
surprised,
happy.
but so okay, yeah. So you're not surprised to see international protests?
No,
Okay. Honestly,
because
gone.
no, that's first of all because in all the news everywhere around the world we were seeing that, for example, in US the number of racism and the data, the statistics were pretty bad, and we were seeing that people of black minority had less access to education, work, housing, and there was a case in 2012 or 13 where one kid was killed, so that
Yeah.
was a trigger. But now in this case, where actually surprisingly, the thing that surprised me is that all the people around this case were filming it and no one got involved.
Yeah, and to be fair, I don't blame anyone for not getting involved because you would have got lit up like a Christmas tree. Like they would have put 6 bullets in you, no hesitation, if you tried to get involved in that one. So I don't begrudge anyone for not getting involved in that situation, but at the same time, it does show you that people saying like this guy's dying, he's not breathing, check his pulse. It does add to the kind of how terrifying the situation was. Because I can't, obviously George Floyd dying, in a lot of pain, but also imagine being a witness to that, saying to the person, look, check his pulse, he's dying, and seeing that, I can't imagine how painful that was, to be one of those people.
Yes, and no, to be honest, like it was just a trigger. It was already there, like all this
Yeah.
accumulation
It
of
was ready to spark up. I was surprised. I'm not gonna lie, because we've seen it with consistently with other people as well. Like Eric Garner, he was put in a chokehold and he was killed not in a kind of similar way, I guess. The only difference being is that what's it called? It wasn't as it was very hard to watch, but at the same time, it wasn't as bad as seeing someone kneel on someone else's neck for minutes on end. But I am kind of surprised. I mean, there's protests in France, but the French don't need a reason to protest. It seems that's as French as you can get, to be honest. But in the UK, I was surprised, and
No, I'm
so
not surprised because, to be honest, it's a big. I do
mm,
have many friends that went to marches, peaceful
yeah.
marches,
But I'm saying like
and I
obviously,
do agree with it as long as it's a peaceful march.
and you keep two
You're
meters away from everyone else, and you wear a mask.
you're increasing the awareness,
Yeah.
that uh, we are here and people need support.
Okay.
It's not about saying that I like some of the posts, like, it doesn't mean that other lives don't matter, but in this
Mm.
case, it is
Yeah,
about
I think
Black Lives Matter,
I
and
think
it
it's
has to be supported
I think
because
the
in this way it will create a domino effect on
yeah.
all the other communities.
Hopefully, I mean, I think the point is like, yeah, clearly, according to some people, Black lives do not matter because the way they're treated by police and other groups as well, because they're not treated as well as the base level is much lower for them in the way they're treated by society, and so you know, eh, that's one of the things that people just don't understand. Um, and so we'll go on to our next point about how to analyze coronavirus data. So, kind of which metrics do you look at when it comes to looking at coronavirus? Because we know Trump recently said that we've done more tests than anywhere in the world. It's like, big man, you've got one of the biggest countries in the world. So it's not really that helpful when you just talk about the raw data. So yeah. So how do you analyze coronavirus data? What kind of metrics are you looking at?
Very different ones. There is to look at the death rate, of course,
Yeah.
the amount of deaths per country. However, I would not say to look at the total number of deaths. Look at number of deaths per 100,000 people, per million people, because this gives you a percentage understanding of
Yeah, and so
the
obviously, so
situation.
the per capita numbers are the ones you're looking at. So testing per capita, and
Yeah,
obviously deaths per capita and cases per capita. But at the same time, I think like looking at methodology is really important because the US methodology is very different to the UK's methodology and to Belgium's methodology. Which I think Belgium say that if it's if you suspect it's coronavirus, then you should write it's coronavirus on the death certificate, which is one of the reasons why Belgium's death rate is so much higher than the rest of the world. And so I think because so many countries have different kinds of methodology, it's important to look at what methods each country uses. Because in America, the CDC was saying if it's suspected coronavirus, put that on the death certificate. But a lot of states aren't doing that because they want to make their states look like they're doing okay. Because obviously the governors, their jobs are on the line, essentially.
yeah,
So look at per capita data, but also look at the methodology that each country uses, the ones that you're looking at. I think that's another important one. Especially because the
yeah,
UK
and
counts tests as two. So when they do the nose test and the mouth test, they count that as two tests rather than as one test. So look at the methodology, and so yeah. So I think that will wrap this one up. Per capita is really important when it comes to testing and death. So what do you think of counterculture taking down all these statues? The statues specifically we'll talk about. What do you think about that? Obviously, there was the Colston one, I think, in Bristol, the slaver. They took his statue down. What do you think?
um, to be honest, I saw a few around the world actually,
Yeah, there's
statues
multiple.
being
Yeah.
brought down. So I kind of agree with that. I understand that person maybe brought economy and money and resources to that city, to the community. However, it's really important to understand by what price, by what cost. I think it was the statue from what city, first one that was brought into the water, not Manchester,
Bristol.
Bristol, yeah.
Yeah.
That person actually got involved in slavery
Yeah.
trade, and he killed, not he killed, but his actions
Killed a lot
uh,
of people.
killed more than 3 million people. And to be honest, um, no, it's like it brings me back a bit to when, for example, my mom tells that, oh, in Soviet Union we did have a good time. But when my grandma talks to me, she's like, I remember how it was done. They created famine in my country, and they how do you call it? They brought many people to Siberia, to gulags. So 30% of population, I think, was just in 2 years distributed or killed.
Okay.
So that's. that's not good. But in
Also,
this case, we speak about more countries, about more communities from
so
Africa that were just, destroyed, and people were sold as um,
a property essentially.
properties.
Yeah.
An example is the zoo that they made in Congo in '58 with people. That is something people need to know about, talk
Yeah.
about, and
I,
increase the awareness that it's unacceptable.
with
And
regards to with regards to say Churchill statue, would you take that down, or would you put that in a museum, or what would you, or would you leave it up? What would you do with that?
to be honest, I can't really say much about Churchill because
Mm,
I don't really know the background that he did. What did he do for the country? The
okay.
lot, and what
So
did he do about the slavery? I need to inform myself
okay, and
first.
I feel like that's important. I feel like putting those sort of statues up is because these guys their history is so mixed. I would put them in a museum, and if you want to celebrate the war effort, put a statue up of a soldier who, the unknown soldier who, which they have done
Yeah,
in I think I can't remember where it is in England, but put one of those up, and put, you can put a male one and a female one up to represent, the efforts of both genders during the war, and to
yeah,
celebrate both both efforts, and do that. Don't put up people like Churchill, because there were a lot of atrocities that Churchill had committed. Obviously, the famine in Bengal. You've got the
yeah,
Dresden bombing as well, and you've got multiple other ones. And so, putting up statues of people with such mixed, is such mixed histories is not a good idea. I think with statues like Colston, Robert E. Lee, get rid of those. Like
yeah.
they're people who did incredibly bad things. Fair enough, they made money, but are if El Chapo built schools in Mexico, are you going to build a statue of him? You know,
No, no, no.
do you know what I
Not
mean?
many other
It,
people.
it don't make sense. There's a separate video I'm going to do on cancel culture, anyways. So, really sorry about the ending. We both ran out of time, and Georgia had other work commitments to do. So as always, thanks Georgia for coming onto the podcast, and hopefully we get to the part two soon, because there's still a lot of questions left to ask. As always, and look, thanks for coming on the show, and if you made it this far, thanks for listening, and hopefully I'll see you next time, and catch you later.